Okay, let's open in a word of prayer. Lord, thanks for this day. We pray that you will bless our time together today as we try to make some sense of things going on in the world that are related to Bible prophecy. Pray you'll bless our time together. In Jesus' name, amen. Well, I have a lot of things to do today, or to talk about today, but I'll try to keep it in a reasonable time frame because there's just there's no way. There's so many things going on with regard to Israel, Middle East wars, rumors of wars. And last year I added a little bit to that, the wars of rumors that I see everywhere. And you are, in a geopolitical sense, on the politics side, you're seeing these massive gaslighting operations. I want to talk about Brazil. If I don't mention Brazil, somebody remind me near the end. Because that relates to some things going on in our politics, which you may or may not be aware of. And it's just sort of this general vibe everywhere that we go, that there's this turmoil, almost chaos. And I will admit, President Trump is an agent of chaos everywhere. But the world is very volatile. The world is on the brink on many different subjects. So this week we're going to talk about here an alliance, there an alliance, everywhere an alliance, you know. And so, like, for example, we have the Abraham Accords and maybe the Saudis coming into that. I represent these by chess pieces, my own Photoshop and that type of thing. So the big tall one there on the gold coins, that's the UAE. That's the tallest, that's the Burj Khalifa. And then the Iranian alliance, they had Hezbollah, the yellow pawn, they had Hamas, they have the Houthis in the lower right, and then they had Syria. And then there's this another alliance, and we'll talk a little bit more about that great article that I'll share with you. And I have about 50 links in the show notes this week that will keep you busy. Because there's a lot in the situation in Syria, but there's an alliance that's growing between Turkey, that's Erdogan, the guy hugging his chess king Qatar, the Qatar chess piece. I'm very proud of that one. I thought of that one, and no, hold your applause until the end because they get better. No, in the article that we'll reference from Israel Hayom is that Qatar is Erdogan's ATM, and they have an emerging alliance. But it's very interesting going back to things I didn't get to last week and see how people were talking about a potential problem, and the problem came about this week. And that's interesting. And now I'm thinking of, by the way, I have how I sort of remind me of things as I message myself. I do notes, and then I resort to the 1950s technology, the notepad, and then I never look at any of them. So, but this is a significant week. I sort of jokingly made up my wheel of prophecy, and some Sunday we'll just take it for a spin and see where it lands, and we'll talk about that. I did do a program this week with Nelson Walters and Sam, we call him Sam the Fisherman. A couple guys I think are pretty good thinkers, and we talked a lot about a lot of issues. You can find that on Nelson Walters' YouTube channel. I sort of enjoy those conversations because it gives us time to just sort of bat some ideas around. And we don't, by the way, I talk to people I don't agree with all the time. In the Bible prophecy field, of course. At home, I agree with everybody all the time. But I think we learn, and it's particularly in the area of eschatology, because eschatology is such a hotly debated topic. And when you sit down with all of I'll go to a conference and I'll be with the prophecy experts, and nobody agrees on things. They agree with some general parameters, but then it becomes widely divergent. And I think that's the way it's going to be. But we do reference this verse all the time in Daniel, that Daniel was told, Daniel, seal, and I really believe this prophetic passage is operative. And so I did a talk a number of years ago called The Masculine, the Wise Who Understand. And Daniel was told, Daniel, seal up the book till the time of the end. It's not for you to understand right now, but many shall be purified, made white, and refined, but the wicked shall do wickedly, and none of the wicked shall understand, but the wise shall understand. And then Daniel 11, it talks about the wise instructing many. And I believe, I'm a futurist, I believe that these prophecies written are for the future, and they will come about, in a real world where people live, and there's political nations and maps and all this other thing, just like when Jesus came the first time, he came in the perfect time, at the right time, in the right place, from the right family, all of that. It's going to happen again with the events leading up to his second coming. So this, this is a tweet that I found. This guy's better than me. He can summarize the Israel-Iran war that took 12 days in 2 minutes and 34 seconds. So let's see how he summarized that.
جمهوری اسلامی تل آویو و حیفا رو با خاک یکسان خواهد کرد.
When the time is up, the operation begins. A tiny nation facing a massive threat, Israel had no choice but to strike swiftly, decisively, using the element of surprise. Dozens of Israeli fighter jets take off into the depths of Iran, equipped with accurate intelligence. The mission: to eliminate the nuclear and ballistic threat posed by the radical Islamic regime to the west. In a one-of-a-kind operation, 10 senior leaders of the Iranian regime were eliminated within minutes. The Chief of Staff, the wartime Chief of Staff, the Commander of the Revolutionary Guard, the Central Headquarters Commander, the Commander of the Air Force, and heads of the nuclear program. Mossad field agents eliminating over 1,000 surface-to-air missile threat. 200 missile launchers, allowing Israel jets to target and attack 6 key nuclear sites, 250 military infrastructures, and 20 Iranian fighter jets with surgical precision. In a rare synchronization, Israel neutralized Iran's defense systems before a single fighter jet took to the sky. While Iran's radical regime targets civilians, hospitals, and dense urban areas, Israel responds with precision, striking only regime targets. 8 days after the strike, the US joins Israel in their first military operation together, destroying 3 nuclear sites, including Fordo. As long as radical Islam keeps igniting the Middle East, Israel will keep protecting us all. A new chapter in the history of the Middle East has begun.
And the question will be, how's that going to go about? Now, I shared with you last week or 2 weeks ago an article from the Wall Street Journal that was talking about one of the sheiks, that one of the clan leaders in Hevron, the Arab society in Israel, and when I say Israel, I'm including Judea and Samaria, often called the West Bank, within that. And within that area, there are a number of important cities. In fact, if you ever get to Israel and you have an opportunity like we have, and we hope to do some of this fall when we go, is to go into these areas that are the biblical heartland. They're in Judea and Samaria. They're in the West Bank. And the interesting thing, though, is you go to these sites, Bethel, Ai, Shiloh, Shem, often called Shechem, Mount Ebal, Mount Gerizim, Samaria. A lot of those sites are located in areas that, as you enter that area, there's a big red sign. And it says, entry is forbidden into this area. It's under the control of the Palestinian Authority. And any Israeli citizen who enters can be fined or imprisoned for going in there. So the interesting thing is that Jewish people who've come back from the nations, but many are descendants of people who've lived in Israel forever, they're not allowed to go into the area of the biblical heartland. And a lot of Christian tours, they're not allowed to go there either because of the security risk. Now, one of those sites I've talked about many times is the Tomb of the Patriarchs in Hevron. Hebron, I call it. I try to say Hevron because my Jewish friends say, oh, it's so wonderful to have somebody say it correctly. But it's funny, when you say Hebrew words in Israel, they will always, well, we don't quite say it that way. They always have a way to correct you to make you feel like you're back on your heels. It's like this big game. And we do the same thing here when, we go down to Alabama or someplace and where they speak a little bit differently. But in Hebron is the Tomb of the Patriarchs. It's the second holiest Jewish site. I've been there a number of times. And there is no doubt that this is an archaeologically significant site, because this is the building built by Herod that was built 2,000 years ago as a commemorative building over the cave where Abraham, Sarah, Isaac, Rebekah, Jacob, and Leah are buried. And there's no doubt about that. And by the way, the tradition among some Orthodox Jewish people is that the cave is also the reason why Abraham wanted to buy it, was this was also the cave where another couple was buried. And that couple was Adam and Eve. And so my friend who is very tied into the community in Hevron, and I've been to his house for Shabbat, he says, Hevron is for lovers, because it's these great love stories that take place. And so Jews go there to pray, not to pray to Abraham or any of the patriarchs, but they go there to pray to remember what Abraham meant for them. They would consider that idolatry. And they would be correct to pray to Abraham. But it's an interesting site. Now, so the sheikhs, a couple weeks ago, one of the sheikhs, the leaders of the clan, the biggest clan in Hevron, came out and said, I don't want anything to do with the Palestinian Authority. And one of the things you need to realize is that the Palestinian Arab society in Judea, Samaria is very tribal in nature. They have clans. It's how Arabic societies are organized. Some Arabic societies have become very successful, for example, but they do that by getting rid of the other tribes and defeating them in a war like the Saudis did. So the Saudis are fairly successful, the Saudi tribe. They're some of the richest people on the planet because of the resources that they were lucky enough to be born over, I guess, and then figured out how to get them out, with other people's help, get them out of the ground. But that society, Saudi is successful because it's one tribe. Another country that's successful is the United Arab Emirates, which are about 6 or 7 clans, and they figured out how to get along and elect one of them to be the leader. And so you see this massive investment, real estate building, growing out of the desert over the last 30 years or so in Dubai and Abu Dhabi. And they're very, very successful because they learned how to join together in what they call an emirate. So Dr. Mordecai Kedar from Israel, he's probably the leading Jewish expert on Arab geopolitics and Islam, speaks fluent Arabic. He's a brilliant guy. His theory about, well, maybe one way so that Israel can make kind of peace with this area of Judea and Samaria is he's come up with, he calls it an 8-state solution or an 11-state solution. There are 7 or 8 clans, or 10 clans, depending on how you count them, and they would be joined together in a federation with Israel. So you have 7 clans in Israel, that would be 8. And he's talked about this for a long time, and it's interesting that a couple weeks ago, the Wall Street Journal published a big article with the leader of this clan saying, I want to get rid of the Palestinian Authority. I want to normalize things with Israel. Now, that's been very controversial in Israel. Some people were really upset that the Wall Street Journal published that because it puts that guy's life at risk. I did a talk on Hevron 8 years ago. And I called it, Pam and I had just gotten back from Israel, and I called it Why Hevron Matters, because it's a very important city, both historically, archaeologically, and prophetically. And I don't have time to go into the prophetic aspect, but I've talked about it in the past. But suffice it to say that at Hevron, Jacob and Esau reunited, reconciled for a time at the funeral of their father Isaac. And so the Jewish rabbis believe that the pattern of Scripture, the story of Scripture, is a pattern for how prophecy will unfold. So the story of the reconciliation of Joseph and Esau, Jacob and Esau at Hevron, at the funeral, at this building, at the cave where Herod's now built this big building 2,000 years ago, is a picture of how there will be an ultimate reconciliation between Jew and Arab, and they believe that it will happen there. So for many years, this building, it was, after the Muslims came in, they took it over, they built a mosque, the Jews were able to build a synagogue up there, and like the rest of Hevron, it's probably the most, at least my experience, the most divided city in Israel. And when I say Israel, I mean the state of Israel and the areas called Judea, Samaria, or the West Bank. It's shocking to me. And I've traveled a lot, and I know in cities in the United States, there are places where they tell you don't go there. Or if you go there and then you talk to somebody, what'd you do last night? Well, I went here. Are you out of your mind? They will say you shouldn't go there. That's not a safe place. In Israel, they have got fences and gates and all these things up in Hevron. But for years, the Muslims controlled it, and it's been very difficult. The Jews have to give the control of their synagogue over every year for 2 or 3 days to the Muslims. And the Jews have mezuzahs on the wall, where they put a Bible verse, and they come back after turning it over for those days, and they've all been ripped off the walls. And they have big cabinets where they lock everything up, very secure, so their scrolls and religious books are not destroyed. And that's Hevron. And you will see there are these big stone things called cenotaphs. They're not gravestones, but they're sort of a memorial stone. And there's like windows with bars on them on the synagogue side looking towards the cenotaph, and then on the mosque side looking towards the cenotaph. And if you get there, if you're on the Jewish side, you will see bulletproof glass next to the cenotaph. And on the mosque side, there's a pile of rocks. because the Muslims throw rocks at the Jewish worshipers at the synagogue. And so they put up bulletproof glass, because these aren't, by the way, these are not stones that just skip across the pond. These are rocks that will kill you. They're like a cannonball. And that's Hevron. And there's been some really bad terrorism on both sides of the issue there. And so the Muslims controlled it, and the Jews were allowed to pray at a place, they called it the seventh step. And if you actually look at the wall, and this went on for hundreds of years, the Jews were only allowed to go there to pray. They couldn't go up to the synagogue. That changed in 1967 when Israel took it back. But like the Temple Mount, the control of that building was turned over to a Muslim authority. And it's been like that, and it's been that way for hundreds of years. Even though the Jewish people have their synagogue there, that they can go there. But if you go there, you walk up steps of the synagogue, and you walk back down and walk back up to the mosque to get to the top of the building, because there's no connection between the two. That's very divided on every level in Hevron. This week, they turned the management, the control of the area, over to a Jewish authority. So I have a friend, I made up this picture, and he's very involved with this, as I said, and he loved it. So and this is very significant, though. And how many of you did not even hear about this? Okay, see, it's only crazy people like me that hear about this, and so I think this is very important. Now, things have changed quite a bit in the Middle East. I'm going to jump into this a little bit further on than I was going to. But this person, he's a Jewish rabbi on X, posted this, and note the post date is July 8th. So July 8th would have been, so this was 12 days ago. This was a week ago Tuesday. And he said, Qatar is quietly opening a new front against Israel in Syria. And they're doing it under the guise of popular resistance. And here's what you need to know. And he has a very long thread. And in the notes with this video, there is a link. It's not identified. You're going to have to click on it's probably one of the latter ones down the list, but you're going to have to click on all of them and read all the stuff that I have to read and I don't have time to talk about today. But note that this was 12 days ago. He said Qatar is opening a new front against Israel in Syria. And we've seen this stunning events that happened in Syria starting on November 30th. The Assad regime had been in power since probably 1970, I would guess. So 50-some years, the Assad family, Bashar al-Assad and then his son, baby Assad, as we call him, they ruled Syria with an iron fist for over 50 years. And in 8 days, that regime fell. It was a stunning thing. It was this group of rebels that came down from the north. I'll use the moniker HTS. And when you analyze it geopolitically, you know that Turkey these rebels were in the south around a town called Dara, Suwaida province. They were rebelling against the Assad regime. That started in March, and Pam, you'll remember, we were at the Sea of Galilee that day, and we got this report. There's riots going on in Dara. It's 30 minutes from where we were sitting at the Sea of Galilee. The Syrian civil war was starting. Over 1 million people are dead. 4 or 5 million people have left the country. There are close to 2 million in Jordan. There's over 1 million in Lebanon. That may have changed, over 3.5 million in Turkey. And then millions more immigrated into Europe. And Europe is completely destabilized now by this Muslim immigration. It is melting down every day. The stories and things that I see are stunning. People who read the Bible in Islamic areas in London get arrested for hate speech. Just reading the Bible. It happens all the time. By the way, I don't have time to play it. There was a member of parliament this week, and I think there's a link to it in the notes. He gave up, he talked about the fact he wanted to do a speech in Parliament in Westminster. And by the way, the House chamber there was a church. They rent that from the British royal family. The British royal family gets rent for Westminster. It's their building, but the government's allowed to use it. In that chapel, the House, which is now the House of Commons, he gave a speech about trying to restore Christianity in the UK. It's a very good speech. There's only one problem. He was the only person in the chamber when he gave the speech. And that's a perfect picture. And so we see this decline of Christianity politically and religiously, and we talk about apostasy and falling away and all that stuff here. It's happening on steroids in the UK. But it's here in America now too. And that's something we need to, as a church, talk about. So in 8 days, this rebel group, so what happened was the rebels eventually reached a ceasefire with Assad. And like most countries in the Middle East, remember when Assyria took over Israel and Babylon took over Judah, what did they do with a large chunk of the population? They deported them. They moved them someplace else. Why? Because they wanted to get them away from their traditions. It was a way of control, and it was a way to get the people, easier to control the people and teach them something different. And it seemed to work. And so what Assad did was and I remember I played the videos here of Assad putting all of these rebels and their families on buses and shipping them up to the north part of Syria, up around Homs and Aleppo. Now, our friend, Mr. Erdogan, has long had a desire. I think this is one of the greatest editorial cartoons I've ever seen of a political leader in the world, because what has Assad's plan been? His plan has been to redraw the map of the Middle East. And that's what this editorial cartoon shows. He's developed doctrines with regard to the blue homeland and water and ocean and Eastern Mediterranean, and he's funding things, and he's sort of following the Iranian model. The Iranian model in Lebanon was we're going to attack Israel from Lebanon, and by goodness, we are going to fight to the last dead Lebanese. That's what the Iranians said. And now Erdogan, it's war by proxy. And our country does it too. You get somebody else to fight for you, and brings a speech, that famous, I can't quote the speech from Patton about World War II, about what the purpose of war is. The purpose of war is for you idiots, not for you idiots to die for your country, but for those idiots to die on the other side, to die for their country. That's a little bit cleaned up from how Patton said it. You can get the movie and watch it. That one would be okay. And so in 8 days, So what Erdogan started doing with these rebel groups in northern Syria was he started funding them, training them, getting them weapons. This happened back in 2017, 2018. And Assad got a little bit comfortable. He had the Russians there to help him bomb the smithereens out of Sunni areas to get them, as one American general said, to get them on the road and move someplace else and be somebody else's problem. And it worked. And you've seen the pictures of parts of Damascus and all these other cities that are just completely destroyed by this bombing that the Russians and the Assad government did. But Erdogan is a patient man. He funded these groups. He trained them starting back in 2017 or 2018. And so now here we sit 7, 8 years later, and those rebel groups, using pickup trucks and some rocket launchers on pickup trucks, came against the Syrian army and took over Syria, in almost all of Syria, except the northeastern part. They took it over in 8 days. The Syrian army had 30 or to 40,000 troops in Damascus. The rebels came in, and I'm going to cite Vladimir Putin on this. He did this at his news conference in December. They came in and took over this area with 800 people. And now they've installed a guy who was al-Nusra Front, tied to al-Qaeda. His name was al-Julani, and he's now changed it. He's now known as al-Shara. And he's called the interim president by some Syrian papers. The interim president of Syria. Oh, when are the elections? Well, maybe 5 years. Okay. So I have some great nieces and nephews here, and 5 years is a large chunk of their whole life, And so this is big. And so Erdogan was very patient. And so he is now entered into, and this is a great article at Israel Hayom, and essentially it says the new Qatar-Turkey alliance. And then there it says, Qatar is Turkey's ATM. They're Muslim Brotherhood, and they're working together. Al Jazeera, the big Muslim Brotherhood network, propaganda network, is funded by Qatar. Erdogan has his own mouthpieces. And so these guys are working together. I think this is the Turkey foreign minister in the little picture there. That's the Emir of Qatar and Erdogan. And by the way, Erdogan lives in a 950-room palace. And all these leaders of the world come to see him, and they shake hands, and they sit in a room for 20 minutes, and they talk, and then he gets up, and they got all these ceremonies. And I'm thinking, personally, his life looks really boring to me. I wouldn't want to be particularly having to wear a suit all the time. That would seem to be a thing. But look, you see Turkey and Qatar down here in this inset. Let me blow that up a little bit. Okay, Qatar is here in the Persian Gulf. It's about 300,000 people. The citizens each get probably a minimum of $2 million a year, because Qatar is a flat spit of sand, but they have gas in the Persian Gulf. They share the largest natural gas field in the world with Iran. They're Sunni, by the way. Iran is Shia. But when it comes to oil and hating Israel, we can get along, right? So that brings in billions of dollars a year, and Qatar sends billions of dollars to the United States, funding chairs and professorships at Harvard and Georgetown and other places. In fact, Georgetown just gave a Distinguished Citizen Award to a person of the world that they thought was just so wonderful and such a great person that Georgetown University, right down the street from the White House, should honor this woman. She's the mother of the Qatar Emir. And by estimates, statements that I've seen from people on X, she's one of the most despicable, evil, immoral people on planet Earth. And Georgetown has given her an award. Isn't that wonderful? And they're taking money from Qatar. Now, yeah, something seems a little bit off here. And this, I'm pretty sure this is the emir. Maybe this, I don't know. These guys are the foreign minister and the prime minister, and then there's an emir. And so anyway, pretty sure it was this guy. Remember, Israel assassinated Hania. He was the leader of Hamas. He didn't live in Gaza. He lived in Qatar. He was on a visit to Tehran, and that's the one where Israel took him out in an assassination. So he had a big funeral at the Grand Mosque, the Great Mosque of Qatar. This guy was sitting in the front row. The imam was up there, and it wasn't like, it was like when we were in Nablus. We were there on Friday when they were at mosque, and I don't speak Arabic, but I heard the imam speak. They broadcast everything over loudspeakers all over town, and you can just tell by the intonation that it's not a message of peace and love your neighbor. It's a message of go slaughter the infidels. And this is, I was with somebody who speaks Arabic, and they said, yep, that's what they're saying. So this guy was in the front row at Hania's funeral, and he's buried in Qatar. And frankly, I do not understand. I'm very concerned about people in our government doing business with Qatar, having a Middle East negotiator who Qatar bought him out when he was in trouble on about $700 million debt on a property in New York City, Steve Witkoff. I have big problems with this. I'm massively upset with this. So this alliance is growing. And if you remember, I showed you this report, the Nagel Commission report that came out in, I think it was released the last day of 2024. And it's in Arabic. You can somebody in Israel sent it to me. And I translated the whole thing and read it, translated it with Google Translate, not like I'm, and it's pretty good, But it says, listen, it's a committee to examine the defense system budget and force building. Why? Israel had a problem on October 7th, 2023. They got taken by surprise. They thought they had the problem managed. They ignored warnings because they're like all of us. We sort of have our own built-in biases, and we think, well, there's a thing called normalcy bias. You see the world falling apart, but it's like you talk yourself out of that it's not really happening. That's really not happening. It would be too difficult, for example, to believe that in Minnesota, the Democratic Party just endorsed a radical Islamic Somalian for mayor of Minneapolis. Don't go there. If you're there, leave. And we have our own problems with that ethnic group here in Columbus. And you need to be situationally aware. And this guy makes the guy running for mayor in New York look like a choir boy. This is in America in 2025. We saw it happen on 9/11, right? But we didn't learn it because we've convinced ourselves it wasn't that bad. We took care of everything. And we didn't. So this report says, listen, Turkey needs to be watched. So this is December 30th. Turkey needs to be watched. Because they're trying, now I disagree with the report's conclusion, they're trying to recreate the Ottoman Empire. And so you'll see this, like this editorial cartoon says, oh, look, we're rebuilding the Ottoman Empire. It's not what Erdogan wants. He is a radical Muslim Brotherhood extremist Islamist. He doesn't want the Ottoman Empire. That's first step, baby steps for him. He wants the whole thing. What do you mean, all of the whole world? That is their, and when they say this, why don't we believe them? I mean, really. And we see this in politics and religion. And I see guys who I generally respect doing these, a night with a Muslim thing, kissy face, huggy bear thing with these radical Islamic imams. And I'm like, you can't do that. You've lost your mind because it's changing. And if you don't think it's changing, go to London. We were there 7 years ago, and I know it's way worse now. And I saw more hijabs in central London than I did in Nablus, which is a Islamic city in Israel. It's shocking. And so the day after this report is released, and I know you're getting tired of this, Erdogan's son has a protest in support of the Palestinians in Gaza at the Gallatin Bridge in Istanbul, and this is the poster. And I'm going to go over it all the time until I start seeing other people talking about it, because this tells you what Erdogan is about. What is his goal? A sun is rising, and that kind of has a double play because Erdogan's son did it, but they have the sun with half Turkey, half Palestinian flag. And then at the top, there were three items. First, it says, yesterday, Hagia Sophia, the largest church ever built in Christianity. An Orthodox church built back in I think it was in the 400s or so. It's been around for a while. And Erdogan 5 years ago turned it into a mosque. Now, I've talked to people about this, and they go, well, it's an Orthodox church, John. Their theology is off. Okay, but it's like, no. I know, I disagree with it. We can go through all those reasons, but the fact is, Erdogan doesn't see any difference between Orthodox and evangelical and Reformed and anything. You're all Christian infidels. And so and by the way, I have this nifty little 3D program. I can rotate images in Photoshop. It's called Pixel Squid. I love the name of that. But this one, when I look it up, I typed in Hagia, for Hagia Sophia. What came up, this one search result, this image came up, and it said Hagia Sophia Grand Mosque in Istanbul. They got Pixel Squid. Pixel Squid has fallen for it. And you go inside that and everything. So yesterday, Erdogan, the things at this protest. Yesterday, we got Hagia Sophia. We got the Christians. In fact, some Christians refer to this as the temple of Christianity. It's this massive church. In the middle, it says, today, Umayyad. Today, Umayyad Mosque in Damascus. It says, today, Damascus. So this is January 1st. They've just had the revolution in Syria. So, by the way, they're doing their own prophecy updates. You understand what I'm saying? With graphics and everything. This is their eschatology. This is how they think it's going to go. And then the other one over here on the right is tomorrow, Al-Aqsa, the Dome of the Rock, Jerusalem, and the Jews. That's the plan. And I'm telling you, but Chuck Missler, great Bible prophecy teacher and friend, and he told me, watch Turkey. And so I took that advice to heart 16 or 17 years ago when he told me that to me. And I've watched Turkey ever since, because when we get into certain prophetic passages like Ezekiel 38 and 39, which I think are future and for our time, there's no doubt Turkey's involved in this. And Turkey is central and core to it. Now, there's an argument about Russia. A lot of people say, what do you mean there's no argument? No, there's an argument about Russia because I'm not sure about that one yet. But, I'm not surprised if it is. But I know we all agree on Turkey, but I hardly ever hear anybody talk about Turkey. I'm not sure. I don't understand it. So that's his plan. And remember back in 2017, I put this up too. We all have our little Ezekiel 38. All these countries coming against little Israel. And Ezekiel 38 and 39, which I believe is future. And we have our little maps. Why don't we just use Erdogan's map? This is his newspaper, one of his newspapers. That's their map. Look at the little red Israel. Look at all the tanks and airplanes and boats and everything coming against Israel. That's Ezekiel 38 and 39 right there in front of your face. And they have how many people in the armies of the Muslim countries, their budgets, their population, which I think is 1.6 billion, as opposed to 8 million Israel. I mean, Iran is 90 million people, and Israel just sort of beat them in 12 days. So we have this, so this is this Qatar thing, and they're setting up, and by the way, Iran is trying to fund groups in Syria. They're trying to reinvigorate Hezbollah. So none of this stuff that we've been seeing going on for the last almost 2 years now, it's not over. It only increases, and if we're at the right time on God's prophetic scale, I think we're kind of in that time frame. Now, I may not live to see it. That's fine. By the way, this is a editorial last year or earlier this year from a Qatar newspaper. And what do you see? You see Israel is the snake eating Syria. This is the imagery that they use for everybody. They train their kids to think like this. This is another organization tied to Qatar. They've issued a fatwa against Israel, meaning go kill them. So this week there was there was a big problem in Syria. So Russia, Iran have used Syria. They funded Syria. Iran to get the Hezbollah to make trouble for Israel. And there were Hezbollah troops in Syria along the Golan border. You can get maps and find that out from Alma Research. And so this week in the Suwada province in southern Syria. So down here you see this right over here at the lower left, there's a dark spot. That's the Sea of Galilee. So that kind of gives you an idea. And it's the Golan Heights, and Israel's extended a buffer zone into Syria a little bit, not much. But they did, because when Assad fell, they thought, maybe we can't trust the people that are taking over this country, so maybe we need to do some things. So Israel engaged in a massive bombing campaign to destroy all the leftover Syrian and Russian military equipment that they could bomb. because they didn't want al-Jilani, the guy from al-Nusra, associated with al-Qaeda, now the interim president of Syria, to get his hands on them and use them against Israel. Because there are videos of al-Jilani, now al-Shara, saying, our goal is Israel and the Christian infidels. He said this. He lived it. He was associated with the guys in ISIS. And so now all those, by the way, everyone goes, what happened to ISIS? Go read the newspapers this week about what's going on in Syria. They're back. They're going through Druze villages and killing them. Here's a group of guys in Suwaida province. They are al-Jilani people in the south of Syria. We send a message to Israel. Your time is near, thanks to the determination of the free and the revolutionaries. And here we are in the Druze holy sites. We've trampled on them. By the way, British Foreign Secretary has sent them 145 million pounds. And they were going through Druze villages and slaughtering people, shooting them, executing them, just like ISIS did. If you didn't know the videos were recent, you would say, oh, well, those are the old ISIS videos being trotted out again. They went into Druze holy sites and turned things down. The Druze are kind of a weird group. They claim to be descendants of Jethro, and they have their own sects, that don't get along with each other. But to them, their beard and mustache is a very big, important thing in their dress. And they were going and making Druze holy guys shave their mustaches and beards. They were holding families at gunpoint and saying, you have a choice. You can jump off the third-story balcony here, or we will shoot you. Hundreds and hundreds of people died over the last few days. Now, there's a big contingent of Druze in Israel. They serve in the army. They're very loyal to the country. They live mostly up around Majal Shams. But some of the guards at the Temple Mount and in the old city of Jerusalem are Druze, because in the Arab quarter, putting Jewish guards up is not the safest thing to do. So the Druze do it, and they volunteer, and they're very good. But there were a couple killed a few years ago at the Lion's Gate by the Temple Mount. Two Druze guardsmen. And so this is the real world. This is yet another flashpoint. And these guys funded by Turkey and Qatar. And so 12 days ago, this Jewish rabbi was looking at the world, reading everything, and he said, Qatar is opening a new front in Syria, and boom, 12 days later, it was. So I don't know if he would consider himself a prophet, but he's certainly right. And we've been talking about it for a long time. We just don't know when it's coming. So this is the area, the green area is Syria. That gray area is kind of like uncontrolled area, but there's still probably a lot of ISIS people there. So the Bedouin tribes, who are affiliated with the al-Jilani, al-Shara regime, attacked the Druze. And they were going in. By the way, I saw videos of guys going into a Druze holy site. I don't know if they call them mosque or churches. I don't know. Okay. They kind of keep to themselves. They kind of dress a certain way. You can when you drive down the street of Majal Shams and up around Mount Hermon, you could say that's a Druze. You just know they're a Druze because of the way they dress and everything. But they're going into their holy site, tearing everything off the walls, these guys. And they're telling you who they are. And how are they dressed, by the way? In the video I saw, every one of the guys destroying the holy site had a press jacket on. A vest they have that say press. Now, how did they figure that out? Because that's what they did in Gaza. Why don't we understand that what they did there, they're going to do everywhere else? Wake up, people. And they are tied to the guys in Afghanistan, to ISIS, Their fight was issued against the Druze. Israel said, we're going to protect them. They went and bombed, and they bombed one of the main headquarters in the city of Damascus. Now, in the Protestant community, everybody says, oh, they bombed Damascus, Isaiah 17. I don't have time to do it this morning. Go read Isaiah 17. It talks about, and I think that's a prophecy for the future, but it's not just Isaiah 17:1. Damascus will cease from being a city. There are about 9 verses there that you need to read and figure out, okay, now how is this possibly going to play out? So we're not at Isaiah 17 yet, but by the way, Israel did that because they're also concerned. There are other reports that people are concerned about this because they've been involved in inspecting the chemical weapons in Syria. And now they can't get access to them because of this dust up. Now that sounds like Baghdad. And it was, oh, that was, Tucker, oh, that's fake news, Tucker Carlson will say. And Tucker, you don't know what you're talking about. Okay, go ahead. Yeah, I'm glad you're rich, but just, we think you're silly at this point. I do. So anyway, so this is a very big deal. So this is Al Akhbar newspaper out of Lebanon, and it's talking about the fact that this is really in Syria. It's on the verge of the civil war, and Israel got drawn in. All kinds of articles. Jerusalem Press, Jewish spiritual leaders spoke out. Al-Shara got up and gave a speech, and he said, look, I've got it under control. Some people got a little bit rambunctious. I mean, that's almost exactly what he said. I'm paraphrasing just a little bit. They got kind of rambunctious, and they might have killed some people. But, Syria, we've been going through this revolution, and we've had all this oppression for these years, and so we're kind of blowing. I know it's almost like they're kind of blowing off steam. But what we really couldn't tolerate was Israel stepped in to help them. That escalated everything. It didn't. It brought it to a conclusion. Now, I will tell you, was it a week ago? Not even a week ago, that Secretary of State Rubio in the White House meeting with Trump said we're lifting all sanctions on HTS. That's the Islamic group that Al-Jilani, Al-Shara was with most recently. We're lifting sanctions on them. That didn't age very well, Secretary Rubio. That was not very bright. So he said, we're going to stabilize everything. He's issued this order. And I don't know who told Trump, if somebody did, that you could say, oh, look at that guy. He looks good in a suit. He's cleaned up now. He got a beard is shaved. He's in Assad's barbershop in the palace. I don't know why that was said. I'm sorry. I don't know. This really bothers me. So this is in the Jerusalem Post this morning. Can Israel trust Syria's leadership? And I think the answer is, it sure doesn't look like it. Now, we've tried to broker a peace arrangement, but there's still people going in. In Syria, a Christian pastor, his family, and a number of parishioners in Syria, in this area, Christian, were all killed. 20 of them. Have you seen, was that on the front page of the New York Times? And by the way, I searched and I want to put up, because we know when these slaughters take place, the people in our colleges and universities want to protest against the slaughter of innocents. So I searched all over the web, and I found the protests taking place at Columbia, Harvard, New York City, elsewhere to protest the slaughter of these innocent Christians and Druze in Syria. And here's what I found. Nothing. No, go. Today would probably be a nice, safe day to walk down through the Columbia University carrying a Syrian flag. you probably get taken out for coffee or something. So, and this AI stuff, by the way, I'm going to do a little bit on AI in just a moment. This popped up in my feed this morning. This is somebody used AI to do this, but I think it's kind of, it's appropriate for what we're seeing. So this is, and there's Putin. And here comes Al-Shara. I don't know. So, by the way, Qatar got involved. Their foreign ministry issued a thing saying, we condemn the slaughter of the Druze. No, we condemn Israel for getting involved in trying to protect the Jews or the Druze. That's where they're at. So these things are, it's not going to be solved anytime soon. Here, this is in the Wall Street Journal. Iran is rushing to get their militias rearmed to fight Israel. The Houthis keep sending a missile every couple days into Israel, and all the things go on. And Israel's this is financially difficult time for Israel. They've had to up their military budget. People are worn out that are in the reserves. There's a lot of psychological PTSD in many soldiers, just like we had the same problem. They're taking their own lives when they get back. Their marriages are breaking up. There are organizations that are trying, some of the people that are involved that are trying to support that. And now they're going back up to the north in Israel, beautiful area along there in the Lebanon mountains, the northern mountains of Israel. And they have to rebuild because Hezbollah just shot rockets and stuff in there like crazy. And a lot of the towns and homes and businesses are destroyed. And remember, there was like 60 or 80,000 people up there that left. And I mean, we were in Kiryat Shimona. It's about 25,000 people, like Dublin, Ohio. And it emptied out. There were only like 30 people left. So this is a big deal. And then this is also in Al-Akbar about that the sponsor of all of this is Turkey. And that's the Lebanese newspaper that's saying that. So here's Sharon Haskell. She's the Deputy Foreign Minister of Israel. She's talking about the situation in the Middle East. She's a member of the Knesset, used to be in the Likud party. I actually got to meet her just briefly, but pretty articulate lady. And here's what she had to say in an interview with Jerusalem Post the other day.
Interesting. Say something about the French-Saudi summit that we know is coming up.
I think, it's just another attempt to gain public international stage. Doesn't have a meaning. There's many countries who've declared the Palestinian state. Did it change reality? No. There are more than, I think it was 98 parliament member in Israel who voted against the declaration of a Palestinian state. This is the Israeli public after the worst massacre of Jews since the Holocaust. And Macron is wanting to reward the terrorist organization Hamas with a state after the crimes against humanity they committed. Their Independence Day is going to be celebrated on the 7th of October. Mm-hmm. It's absurd.
From a foreign policy standpoint, these aren't just two minor countries. This is France and Saudi Arabia. They're our allies, our partners. Is Israel worried about the implications of this?
Look, I'm not worried because it doesn't have any meaning, any effective meaning.
You're saying it's more declaratory than...
I'll tell you what I'm worried about. Every declaration like that gives Hamas a breath of air. So when Hamas is listening constantly to international media, to Israeli media, to international events that are unfolding, every declaration like that, every actions against Israel takes us further from a ceasefire because they think, here it comes. Let's wait another month. let's wait another week. Let's continue to say no, because here France comes and they're going to give us a gift, a state. So we just need to hold on a little bit further so that we can be rewarded.
So what's going on between Israel and Syria?
Look, we keep our eyes open. We are very concerned. I saw that yesterday Turkey led another attack on the Kurdish people.
That Israel has been supportive of.
It's not just Israel. The Western civilization owe the Kurdish people a debt.
Right.
They fought and destroyed ISIS, a serious threat for humanity. They paid a serious price, and we owe them a debt. And the regime in Syria is going to be judged by its actions towards the minority in Syria, whether it's the Kurdish, Alawi, Christian, Druze, and many others.
And what have you learned in the time since they've taken over?
We have to keep our eyes open.
But Israel is talking to the Syrian new Syrian regime, which is in itself a big deal.
First of all, there wasn't any reports of Israel's meeting officials, and it hasn't been happening in like channels and things like that. We are very concerned about the minorities.
Okay.
You understand our relationship also with the Druze community.
Of course.
If the needs of humanitarian aid that will be provided to them, and Israel did provide it, and the safety of them, we're greatly concerned for that. But there's a lot of trust that needs to be built, because don't forget, this leader was the leader of Al-Qaeda. It was a leader in ISIS.
Yeah.
This is a terrorist mind. And whether it can be reformed, I don't know. Many research here in Israel shows they can't. So it's going to be a serious question.
Saudi Arabia. How close are we to a breakthrough?
Look, obviously it's being discussed throughout many years, including now. I think that the leadership needs to make a decision. And I think...
Leadership here or in Saudi Arabia?
In Saudi Arabia. I heard even a statement talking how they shouldn't sacrifice the future of the Saudi people because of the Palestinian cause. And how the Palestinian leadership have destroyed so many opportunities. I mean, the offer for a Palestinian state was there on the table for years, multiple times. They refused. They didn't want it. Why? Because their bigger goal was not a Palestinian state. It was to obliterate the state of Israel.
So she goes on, she talks about, listen, the Saudis, they sound like they're kind of coming into the normalization agreement, the Abraham Accords. And she's heard some people say things, and she's the deputy foreign minister, but it's not there yet. But this is an interesting article in the Spectator World this week, and it's kind of an interesting magazine. I have a prophecy roundtable on transhumanism, technocracy coming up on August 13th with the usual guys, and we'll talk a lot about AI. There's a tremendous amount happening there. I don't know that a 4 or 5 hour discussion would be enough to even scratch the surface at this point. But this is the September, no, it's either the July or August issue of the Spectator World. August. The End is AI. And they have a bunch of articles in there about the religious aspect of AI and the people that are involved in AI and the technocrats and everything. And they have this very heavy religious component about immortality and that type of thing. Remember, go back 10 years, Yuval Harari spoke in Google headquarters in Silicon Valley, and he said, I love coming here to Silicon Valley. I get to see my friends. This is 10 years ago. And he said, it is here in Silicon Valley, though, that the religions that will control humanity in the 21st century are being created. And that kind of has a prophetic ring to it. You know what I mean? So, and then a big article in there related to the normalization, Abraham Accords, on where is Jared Kushner. It starts off like this. In the first Trump term, as senior advisor, Kushner was everywhere and into everything. At home, he designed policies and plotted re-election efforts. Abroad, he orchestrated the Abraham Accords, which normalized relations between Israel and several Muslim nations. This magazine even produced a 2020 cover examining the pervasive power of Prince Jared. And this has a lot of Bible prophecy implications to it. You just need to look into this. There's a link to the article. It might be behind a paywall, but it is a very important article. And now he's behind the scenes. You know, he's not in power, but he's going on to these big conferences like Albania and setting up businesses in Albania. How many had that on their list of things that are going to happen in 2025? Jared Kushner goes and set up businesses in Albania with millions of dollars. It just shows to tell you that some of these things that happen that, not saying Albania is related to the Bible prophecy, but I'm just thinking that a lot of these things happen behind the scenes, I guess is the point. And we don't really know about them until well down the road. There's no doubt that his relationships Kushner cultivated during his White House years, particularly with Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, UAE leader Mohammed bin Zayed, and even North Korea's Kim Jong-un, are just too valuable to abandon. By the way, the friendship with Kim Jong-un so impressed the late Queen Elizabeth that she reportedly privately remarked that the Trump family may be the only one more connected than hers. It's kind of it. This is a Spectator. I mean, I'm just saying, I said this last week. When you hear secular people speaking in terms of things that you read about in the Bible and Bible prophecy passages, you ought to go, wait a minute, where have I heard that before? And then go study your Bible and see how things are unfolding. Because all those prophetic passages, I'm not saying they're now, but they will unfold in a real world. Jesus will return to a real world, just like he came to a real world the first time. And then there was, I think there were some articles recently. Let's see. There was one here someplace. I talked last week about, here, Tehran's geopolitical disillusionment, and down here, the Islamist impact on British democracy. That's having a huge impact. Netanyahu led on Iran and Syria. And then down here, it says, becoming a regional superpower is the article. And I played that guy from Turkey, and he was talking about Pax Israelica, like Israel's trying to get a peace in the Middle East. And that ought to raise some things with you. And now here in the Jerusalem Post, Friday, there's two articles, one talking about it becoming a regional superpower, and then David Weinberg, who we like, he's a lawyer, and we always respect those people extra around here. Get used to a revamped strategic situation anchored by a very strong Israel, superpower thinking. And he's talking about the same thing that the Turkish guy was talking about, but the Turkish guy wasn't talking about it favorably because he wants to get rid of Israel. He's one of Erdogan's boys. Okay, I'm not going to talk too much about this. So politically, we have this massive problem in the United States. And Trump's approval rating is plummeting, even among people on the MAGA right. I saw a person would consider themselves to be right-wing, and they said, the issue of Israel and the hatred of Israel is what will unite the right and left in America. And that's sort of the horseshoe theory, that it's not left out here and right over here, or for you guys. It's a horseshoe, and they eventually meet over something. And there are people on this woke right that are saying it's going to be over Israel. And so now we have this Epstein thing. I saw a long interview with one of the journalists that interviewed this in the New York Times this morning. Tina Brown. And she did it, and she's like, Epstein was a horrible guy. And I'm just saying I want stuff that can be released that can be released. Some of this stuff cannot be released because it will violate the victims of Jeffrey Epstein and others. You just can't release these if there are videos of it. You just can't do this. These people are already traumatized. So I just would say lower your expectations on whether people are going to jail or being prosecuted. That's my opinion. I'm a lawyer. I know how these things work. These indictments are very complicated. And in cases where people have investigated, it takes years, 3 years to put complicated cases together with teams of 50, 60 people. And so the Trump administration hasn't had time to do that. And you just can't dump this stuff out there on the public. I'm sorry, that's just not ethically permitted or statutorily permitted. Now, so pray for these guys that they'll make the right decision. Trump said release everything. They've moved to release the grand jury testimony. It's a pretty big, unusual move in my estimation. And we'll see. And people say, well, what was Ghislaine Maxwell? She was convicted of trafficking young girls. Yeah, trafficking them to Jeffrey Epstein, not anybody else. There probably are other people involved, but right now we don't know that. So we got to be kind of careful how we don't jump to conclusions. So this is a big bill. I've got two things I need to play here. Global crypto assets reached 4 trillion. NVIDIA hit 4 trillion in market value. This is an AI company, a chip company. And then we've been talking about digital identity, central bank digital currency, cryptocurrencies, blockchain. Congress just enacted this the other day. I think Trump may have signed it. It's called the Genius Act. Not sure. Certainly wasn't the geniuses who introduced it, so maybe they wanted to be thought of that way. But it passed, and it has a lot of provisions in it. And, so this digital thing is a big deal. We're going to see it controlled. Digital asset. The term digital asset means any digital representation of value which is recorded on a cryptographically secured distributed ledger. That's blockchain. So they will say, we're going to digitize, they're going to tokenize your house, and it's going to be put on the blockchain. But you'll love it because it'll be secure. People won't be able to engage in mortgage fraud and all this other stuff. And a lot of that is true, but there are other things that are happening. So they also talk about distributed ledger, that's blockchain. They talk about federal qualified non-bank payment stablecoin issuer. And I'm like, I've got to read the definitions section and then go get a dictionary to find out what they're talking about, because this is very complicated and this is the way the world is going to run. And we talk about a financial system, the beast system, it's being put in place. And this is happening everywhere in the world all at once. And I don't think it rolls back. I'm just saying. Now, some of it there will be good parts to it, but there will be bad stuff to it. Talking about drones. Ukraine is doing a great job with drones. They're building millions of drones a year in Ukraine. More than we are, the United States. And they're really making it difficult for Russia. And the war's become very costly just from a human standpoint and economics for Russia. And I know some of my friends will say you're falling for propaganda. I'm just telling you, I'm reading a lot of different things on both sides of the issue. Pro-Russian guys told me that was going to be over in 3 days to 2 weeks. Do you remember that? And it's been 2.5 years. And somebody said if Russia advanced at this rate to take over all of Ukraine, they would be done in 100 years. They're not moving that quickly. And the drones are slowing them down. Then Russia came out and said, okay, we're jamming the drones. They came up with a device to jam the drones. So what did the Ukrainians do? They started flying them by fiber optic wire. Now that limits the thing. Now they're cutting the fiber optics. So the Ukrainians, you know what they're doing? They're using AI to make these drones autonomous to make their own decisions on targets. And big article of all places in the New Yorker this week about drone swarms. In the New Yorker. Wait a minute. I don't see anything like that in the New Yorker like ever. Iron Beam's coming out as a game changer. Technological issues, a lot of lessons learned for Israel. They did a pretty great job. And then here's an interview in yesterday's Wall Street Journal with a guy named Palmer Luckey. He's a billionaire. He's like 28. He should have a name Lucky, right? You know, who is he? Get to know him here in Columbus, Ohio. $9 billion investment in a drone plant down at Rickenbacker Air Force Base on the south side, down by Grove City, to manufacture drones for military. The World Economic Forum had a thing, top 10 emerging technologies of 2025. Look at some of these structural battery components, osmotic power systems. These are the top 10 technologies. Advanced nuclear technologies, they need power. Engineered living therapeutics, microbes designed to deliver therapies on demand. Well, how do they do that? They will inject you with microbes to deliver therapeutic medicine or treatment. I mean, I have an artificial joint, okay, but I don't want anybody injecting little tiny things into me. Autonomous biomechanical sensing. Wiring biological sensors for real-time insight. In other words, you're walking around, your biometric data is being fed to the cloud for people to analyze. Now, I know that everybody can make the argument about the good part, but it's also like, I'm not sure I like that. And I read Revelation, and I think that that's going to be abused by somebody at some point. And this big conference in June on World Economic Forum. And they were talking about, here's a little clip, from weak signals to societal transformation. That's the goal. Here's a lady, 44 seconds, speaking at that conference in late June.
Sensing that relates very much to what Professor Lee's talking about in terms of the opportunities for personalisation of medical treatment, but also about safety and trust in supply chains and being able to pick up contamination in, say, environmental areas, in food systems throughout the whole process. One of the advantages of these kinds of sensing technologies is that they can give us a signal before there's a big outbreak. So if you can imagine very low levels of contamination, say in a water system or in a particular factory, might allow us to get that traceability and to maintain safety for the populations in an easier way.
Do you hear what she's sort of implying? It's easier to control the population with these technologies. AI is going to lead to a Mad Max. I mean, it's affecting employment everywhere. In fact, I saw a big article this morning. I don't remember where it's talked about. What are we going to do when we don't have white-collar people, jobs for white-collar people, because AI is taking them over? And it's already happening. I mean, I had a young lady this week. She's going to be a freshman in college this fall. What should I major in? She asked me. I just met you, for one thing, and but I'm a friend of her dad's, and I'm like, I don't know what I would tell him. Honestly, become a plumber, because people are going to be using plumbing. We know that. And so this United Nations Global Risk Report that was just released, and they go through, they talk, and I love the graphics that people use. I want to make them for my thing. And so here are the great risks in the world, how they're all interconnected, and the biggest risk, geopolitical tension is the most interconnected risk, and then mis and disinformation are unique barriers compared to other risks. In other words, they're concerned that you might be getting information that they don't control. So I've got 2 clips. This will take about 5 minutes, but I want you to listen to this. This is the Reagan Defense Forum earlier this year, and the guy, his name is Alex Karp, kind of interesting guy for a technology. Oh, okay. Brazil. Okay, real quick. See, she's going to make me go longer. That's my wife. Oh, it's my sister-in-law. That's even more understandable. Anyway, so Brazil. So yesterday, the House released a document, and I'm trying to get you to connect the dots. It was a big letter, had a lot of information in it, because there is a new sheriff in town, whether you like him or not, and the House is under control of different people, and they have gone through and they have pulled out and showed that there were a massive number of NGOs funding to the millions and millions and millions of dollars opposition groups to Benjamin Netanyahu. I called it the Biden administration for a specific reason. This is who's controlling that. Now, what does that have to do with Brazil? Trump likes the former president of Brazil, Bolsonaro. He is a very good Christian guy. I know people who know him very, very well. There was a guy that ran against him. He was banned from running from office because he was a convicted criminal, and somehow they got the control of the judiciary, and the guy's conviction was overturned. He ran against Bolsonaro, and you're not allowed to say what you think about the results. He has now put Bolsonaro under curfew, house arrest, wearing an ankle bracelet, and that type of thing. Trump is really upset about this. Trump is upset about what they're doing to Bibi Netanyahu, his friend. He's upset what they're doing to Bolsonaro. Here's the point. You are going to see, this is me acting as a sort of a minor prophet here. You're going to see all over the press this week, look at Trump interfering in Brazil politics. It's terrible that he's interfering with an election in Brazil. When Barack Obama and his cohorts used these our money funded NGOs to interfere in Israeli politics. That will never come up. That was the import of the House letter released on July 17th by the House subcommittee that's been investigating it. I'm telling you, folks, it's really weird out there. And so last week my title was Wars, Rumors of Wars, and Wars of Rumors. And that's what we see. There's this narrative that's being pushed everywhere. You saw Sharon Haskell. They said, well, you Israeli people are meeting with Syria leader. She goes, we're not meeting with anybody. That's just somebody saying something in the news. Wars of rumors. You need to be attuned to the fact that this is happening everywhere. Narratives, control the narrative. And we could go into the funding of NGOs by Obama and his billionaire friends and that type of thing. And I'm telling you, it happened. And there was taxpayer money that was laundered through these LLCs to NGOs to fund things on the left. And by the way, do you ever wonder how all these guys show up at a protest in Minneapolis one day and Milwaukee the next, and they're all dressed the same? And then there's riots in LA, and the guys are driving down the street to where the riots are, and what do they see on the side streets? Pallets of bricks for people. And this just doesn't, in a bad area where there's no building going on, you don't have pallets of bricks sitting around unless somebody's put them there for a specific reason. I am so worked up right now that thanks for reminding me. Okay. so I need to play just a little bit of a couple clips. We're going to do more. We'll do more in the technology roundtable. Alex Karp is a founder of Palantir. It's a big technology AI company. They've been given a contract to hoover up all of the government data on everyone and put it in a centralized location. Now, some of that's good. I can make the case. Well, if you pay me, I can make the case for that's a good thing. But I want you to listen to what he said, because this, I don't know. Here we go. Alex Karp at the Reagan Defense Forum.
Dr. Karp, did I see you want to get in there?
No, it just so everyone apologize. The acoustics are weird, so I can't. If I don't address what you said, it's because we can't hear it. But in any case, I, as an unhappy Democrat with maybe one rep that I agree with in the whole world besides Senator Fetterman, I don't think these things. The interpretation of these stats is, well, America voted. Is in contradiction with these stats. I actually don't see it that way. Well, the way I see it is, Americans are the most loving, God-fearing, fair, least discriminatory people on the planet. And they want to know that if you're waking up and thinking about harming American citizens, or if American citizens are taken hostage and kept in dungeons, or if you're a foreign power sending fentanyl to poison our people, something really bad is going to happen to you and your friends and your cousins and your bank account and your mistress and whoever was involved. And when Americans are spending $1 trillion on defense, what I want and what I think my peers want is, why are these people keeping our citizens hostage, torturing our people, attacking our allies, maligning us in what was once called the United Nations, basically a discriminatory institution against anything good? We need to stand up, and those people need to be scared. And that's why this conference is so important, because we have the best products in the world, and we cannot have parity. Our adversaries do not have our moral compunction. If it's even, they will take advantage of our niceness, kindness, our desire to be at home in Nebraska or New Hampshire or wherever we live in our peaceful environments. And they need to wake up scared and go to bed scared. And if you give that to the American people will go back and say, and honestly, probably shouldn't say this is why I thought the Democrats were going to lose the election, why they did, because people want to live in peace. They want to go home. They do not want to hear your woke pagan ideology. They want to know they're safe. And safe means that the other person is scared. That's how you make someone safe. And the average American person understands this. Unfortunately, many of the intellectually captured institutions, funneled and intellectually owned by the Berkeley faculty, do not. And that's what they want. It's sure as hell what I want. And that's what Palantir and all the people in this room, I hope, we're here to serve the American people. And my version of service is, the soldiers are happier, the enemies are scared, and Americans go back to enjoying the fact that we're the only one with a real tech scene in this country, and we're going to win everything. That's how I see it.
Now, so you understand the conundrum that we're in with that. Because on one hand, we did want the Germans and the Japanese in World War II to be afraid of us, right? Because that's sort of the purpose of the army. Kill people and break things. And so he's trying to say, we're going to take technology to do that. And now, but the technology is very intrusive. And so that's a real quandary. Like, where do we draw the lines? Do you think Kim Jong-un, if he gets this, he's going to draw a line other than to make us really scared? We hear a mosquito and we wonder if it's a drone coming for us. You understand what I'm saying? And so part of what he says I like, but part of it scares me because of where we are technologically, where we are, what I think is prophetically. It's, I'm glad, I keep saying this, I'm glad I'm an old guy, but I have family that are little, and I'm concerned about them too. So Palmer Luckey the guy doing the drone thing down here, he was with Palantir. Now he's in Columbus, billions of dollars for a factory to build drones. He's going to use AI technology. That's a given. And the question is, where do we draw the line on all of this? And so technology people are really concerned about this. They heard what Alex Karp said at this defense forum, and they've gone ballistic. But I can say that I agree with some of what he had to say, but I'm very concerned with what he had to say at the same time. One of the other co-founders of Palantir is a guy named Peter Thiel, very tied into the Republican administration, the tech guys, the tech bros, whatever you want to call them. He was interviewed by the New York Times this week. I'm just going to play like 2 minutes of this. I have like hours of him talking because he's been talking about the same subject all the time. Ralph Stewthart at the New York Times 3 weeks ago asked him this question. And again, when you hear people talking about end times themes, now Thiel claims to be a Christian, but well, we'll see. Here we go.
What does it mean for the economy? What does it mean for geopolitics? You know, one of the conversations, you know, we had a few, you know, recently was you and I had was, you know, does it change the calculus for China invading Taiwan? Where, you know, if we have an accelerating AI revolution in the military, is China falling behind? And will this, and maybe on the optimistic side, it deters China because they've effectively lost. And on the pessimistic side, it accelerates them because they know it's now or never. If they don't grab Taiwan now, they will fall behind. And either way, this is a pretty important thing. It's not thought through. We don't think about what AI means for geopolitics. We don't think about what it means for the macro economy. And those are the kinds of questions I'd want us to push more.
There's also a very macroscopic question that you're interested in that, you know, we'll pull on the religion thread a little bit here. You have been giving talks recently about the concept of the Antichrist, which is a Christian concept, an apocalyptic concept. What does that mean to you? What is the Antichrist?
How much time do we have?
We've got as much time as you have to talk about the Antichrist.
All right. Well, I could talk about it for a long time. No, I think there's always a question. You know, how do we articulate, you know, some of these existential risks, some of the challenges we have, and they're all framed in this sort of runaway dystopian science text. There's a risk of nuclear war. There's a risk of environmental disaster, maybe something specific like climate change, although there are lots of other ones we could come up with. There's a risk of, you know, bioweapons. You have all the different sci-fi scenarios. Obviously, there are certain types of risks with AI. But I always think that if we're going to have this frame of talking about existential risks, perhaps we should also talk about the risk of another type of a bad singularity, which I would describe as the one world totalitarian state. Because I would say the political solution, the default political solution people have for all these existential risks is one world governance. You know, what do you do about nuclear weapons? We have a United Nations with real teeth that controls them, and they're controlled by an international political order. It's and then something like this, you know, is also you know, what do we do about AI? And we need global compute governance. We need, you know, a one world government to control all the computers, log every single keystroke to make sure people don't program, you know, a dangerous AI. And I've been wondering whether that's sort of a you know, going from, you know, the frying pan into the fire. And so the atheist philosophical framing is one world or none. That was a short film that was put out by the Federation of American Scientists in the late 40s. Starts with a nuclear bomb blowing up the world, and obviously you need a one world government to stop it, one world or none. And the Christian framing, which in some ways is the same question, is Antichrist or Armageddon. You have the one world state of the Antichrist, or we're sleepwalking towards Armageddon. One world or none, Antichrist or Armageddon. on one level are the same question. Now, I have a lot of thoughts on this topic, but sort of one question is, and this was a plot hole in all these Antichrist books people wrote. How does the Antichrist take over the world? It's he gives these demonic, hypnotic speeches, and people just fall for it. And so it's this plot hole. It's this daemonium.
Right. It's totally, it's implausible.
It's a very implausible plot hole.
Right.
But I think we have an answer to this plot hole. The way the Antichrist would take over the world is you talk about Armageddon nonstop. You talk about existential risk nonstop. And this is what you need to regulate. It's the opposite of the picture of Baconian science from the 17th, 18th century, where, the Antichrist is like some evil tech genius, evil scientist who invents this machine to take over the world. People are way too scared for that. In our world, the thing that has political resonance is the opposite. It is the thing that has political resonance is we need to stop science. We need to just say stop to this. And this is where, I don't know, in the 17th century, I can imagine a Dr. Strangelove, Edward Teller type person taking over the world. In our world, it's far more likely to be Greta Thunberg.
Okay, I want to suggest a middle ground between those two options. It used to be that the reasonable fear of the Antichrist was a kind of wizard of technology. And now the reasonable fear is someone who promises to control technology, make it safe, and sort of usher in what, from your point of view, would be a kind of universal stagnation, right?
Well, it's more, that's more my description of how it would happen.
Right.
So I think people still have a fear of a 17th century Antichrist.
Yes.
We're still scared of Dr. Strangelove.
Right, but you're saying the real Antichrist would play on that fear and say, you must come with me to avoid Skynet, to avoid the Terminator, to avoid nuclear Armageddon.
Yes.
And I guess my view would be, looking at the world right now, that you would need a certain kind of novel technological progress to make that fear concrete, right? So I can buy that the world could turn to someone who promised peace and regulation if the world became convinced that AI was about to destroy everybody, right? But I think to get to that point, you need one of the accelerationist apocalyptic scenarios to start to play out, right? To get your peace and safety Antichrist, you need more technological progress. Like, one of the key failures of totalitarianism in the 20th century was it had a problem of knowledge. It couldn't know what was going on all over in the world, right? So you need the AI or whatever else to be capable of helping the peace and safety totalitarian rule. So don't you think you need your worst case scenario to involve some burst of progress that is then tamed and used to impose stagnant totalitarianism? You can't just get there from where we are right now.
Well, it can
Greta Thunberg's on a boat in the Mediterranean, like protesting Israel. I just don't see the promise of safety from AI, safety from tech, even safety from climate change right now as a powerful universal rallying cry, absent accelerating change and real fear of total catastrophe.
I mean, these things are so hard to score, but I think environmentalism is pretty powerful. I don't know if it.
Well, that goes on for a while. That's a very interesting conversation, and we need to wrap it up. So, hey, I didn't expect the New York Times to do a prophecy update on me this week. Anyway, by the way, Ross does ask him, "Are you the Antichrist?" And I'm not going to tell you what he said, but he did freeze up for a minute. He didn't immediately, he kind of froze. Anyway, a crazy world. Roundtable coming up on August 13th, I think. Wednesday, August 13th, 7:30 p.m. And thanks for coming. And let's pray. Lord, thanks so much for your word. We pray, Lord, that you will give us wisdom, insight, and understanding, opportunities to share the gospel with those around us in a world that is just really on edge, on the brink. And we just pray that you'll give us wisdom to operate and navigate in these days, protect our families. Bless us this week. In Jesus' name, amen.